Hi, hello, and welcome back to the Wool Sea Knitting Channel. My name is Rachel, I am your host. I am a knitter based out of Ottawa, Canada, and this channel is my chatty outlet to talk all things knitting with occasional guest appearances by other crafts. And I have been quite delinquent in filming or posting any videos in a while. My life has been very busy. I moved, if you couldn't tell from the new background. I started a new job, and for these reasons and many others, my life has become very busy as of late. So despite being aware of how my hair looks in this moment, I fear that if I don't sit down now to film this video, it will be months until you see or hear from me again. So without much further ado, this is going to be a pretty classic knitting podcast update. I have a couple of finished objects, I have a couple works in progress, and I just kind of had the itch to film and talk about knitting. So bear with, I'm a little rusty, but yeah, it's nice to be back. The first thing I have to talk about is a month or so ago, I mostly finished this fortune sweater by Petite Knit, which I made out of one strand of a hand-dyed Surrey alpaca silk and another strand out of a 2-ply sort of heathered cashmere merino yarn cone that I got from Color Mart like 4 years ago now. I started this project in September of last year, and it took absolutely forever to finish because I was struck with some hand injuries, which really slowed down my knitting and has continued to slow down my knitting. But I have been knitting a little, so I have stuff to show you. But anyway, I finally finished this. I did run out of both yarns. I completely miscalculated when I bought the required yarn for this 4 or 5 years ago and had to scramble to find more that would work for this project, given that the Color Mart yarn, if you're unfamiliar, it's mill ends. So, you know, once it's done, often it's done. And the hand dyer who made the Surrey alpaca silk no longer produces this base. So after I acquired this information, went to Ravelry and started messaging people who had recently stashed this particular yarn in this particular color to be like, where did you buy it? If you don't mind me asking, hi, I'm a stranger, where did you buy it? Because it seems that you bought this recently, and do you know if they still have any in stock? And one woman who was in Toronto, where I'm sort of from and where like my mom lives and where a lot of my friends live, and she said, I actually had not just purchased this yarn, I bought it in a yarn store in Quebec like 3 years ago, but I have just been recovering from surgery, so I have gotten around to uploading my entire stash on Ravelry. And I was like, that makes total sense, thank you for your time. And then she says, why do you need it? And I said, I have to finish a project. And she says, I'll just sell you mine. So super serendipitous, I was due back in town to visit family and help my partner move all of his stuff into this apartment. And she actually lived pretty close to my mom. So I hopped on transit and paid her what she paid for the yarn and finished the sweater. And she showed me some of her really cool yarn collection. I met her really sweet Angora rabbit. Honestly, it was a really delightful interaction. So I was able to finish the sweater by the grace of a very kind stranger. And then I also ran out of the wool base and went with a friend to Wool Time, the largest yarn store in Canada, which also happens to be in the suburbs of the city I live in, and picked up a yarn which was the same base and very, very similar, at least by eye, like weight and woolen spun composition, a slightly different color. And so I used that for the cuffs, trying to be strategic about where the color changes. And you can see maybe that the bottom hem is a slightly different, lighter shade of gray because I used this other yarn, which was a European brand. I only bought the one, I lost the ball. It's Lamana. This is a Lamana yarn that I used to finish the cuffs and the final sleeve. I have enough left over of these scraps to make maybe a really comfy pair of mittens or fingerless mitts, which are something that I do find I need now that I've realized that heat or cold affects how well my hands are doing. And that's not the end of the world. I do think it's funny that I did have to buy both of the yarns that went into this, like another amount of them to finish this project, considering this was supposed to be a deep stash busting project. It was one of the oldest sweater quantities of yarn in my house. So I'm very happy to have this. The Fortune Sweater by Petite Knit I consider to be a deeply underrated petite knit pattern. Something about the look, the fit, the drape, the ease is very classic and timeless for me, and I love it. So I'm very happy to have a second, and this is, as far as I'm aware, the second sweater I've ever made for myself, which is about as high an endorsement I can really give it. If you go back like 3 or 4 years in my video catalog, you'll find a video that's called Ode to the Fortune Sweater, and I stand by what I said in that. I'm really happy to have a second in a more winterized fiber. I think this will be incredibly warm and a little bit more versatile for the office than my first version. But the first version I made, my original, I knit in one strand of Drops alpaca silk, and it was beautiful and comfortable and the perfect fall or spring sweater or on cooler summer nights. However, it was not warm enough for Canadian winters. And also, I don't know if it's because I put it on the wool cycle in the laundry machine a few times, or just because Drops alpaca silk is not the best quality or most durable thing, but it's kind of taken on a bit of a matted look, which isn't as nice. And I mean, I still love that sweater and I still wear it, but I wanted one that was warmer and one that was in a neutral, in the kind of color scheme that I wear pretty often. I mean, as you can see by the dress. I have not sewn down the collar yet. I decided to, for this, I did the double knitting technique to fold the collar that has been in later petite knit patterns because I thought, why not try it? And I knit in elastic as I did it. However, it still has a bit of a conical shape when I put it on, and it kind of feels like the elastic has done nothing. When I sew in elastic, I get the proper folded collar look that I'm after, whereas with this, I was trying to avoid the effect that my first sweater had before I sewed in elastic, which is that the collar sort of points upwards as opposed to lying nicely along my collar. It didn't work. So I have to sew this down. It shouldn't take that long, but I'm saving it for a moment where I want to be working on knitty things, but my hands are not cooperating with the act of knitting itself. I find sewing things, for some reason, just doesn't require the exact same position, and even when my hands are mad at me from working at a desk all day, I can still do things like that, at least for a few minutes while watching a show or something. Also, I filmed some B-roll of trying this on before the last time I tried to film a podcast episode, which was like a month ago, and it was so warm. You can see I'm visibly sweating in the clip, and so with how warm this is, I will not be wearing it anytime soon, so I have time to work on the collar. My only other finished object, even then, is much like the Fortune Sweater, not actually finished. I have simply finished the knitting. It is this Aosta baby sweater, knit in leftover Drops Sunday from a sweater that I knit my mother with some scrap Road to China Light by the Fiber Co. for these contrast edges, which I did because I think it's really cute and I feel like makes the sweater a little bit more gender neutral, but also because I lost the other ball I had of this and forgot that I owned it in the first place. So I thought I was playing a pretty extreme game of yarn chicken and in fact frogged the entire sweater once because I didn't think I had enough yarn. I did. I found the other ball after I completed this. That was super frustrating, but plenty for mending. And as you can see, I have not woven in all the ends. I've woven in some of them, and I have not added buttons. This is one of my go-to baby sweaters, especially when you're knitting a sweater for like a baby, because it has this button placket at the neck, which makes it easy to open and close, which is one, really cute and sweet, and two, good if you have a baby because their heads are much bigger than their little bodies. Okay, I have tucked in some of the ends to give the illusion of it being more finished than it is, and because I thought it was distractingly ugly with all the ends hanging out. So yeah, here it is. This needs a good steam before it's given to anybody, but this is the result of twin efforts to, one, scrap bust a lot more, and two, continue preparing a stash of baby gifts for the future, because I'm hitting that age where more and more people around me are starting to have children, including people I care about, and I would like to have stuff to give them, especially my friends who also knit and know how to take care of and prioritize natural fibers like this. So they'll be ready when the time comes. And these are, this is supposedly a baby-friendly yarn. One of my friends has made many baby sweaters in this yarn, and I trust her endorsement of it. I made this in sort of a modified, like 3 to 6 month size. I find that this sweater, the amount of cast-on stitches at the underarm make the chest look tiny and the stomach look huge, which I think is probably true to newborn dimensions. I don't know how true that is to like a 2-year-old's dimensions, but so I did cut about 2 stitches from either underarm cast on amount to lower it just a little bit and extend the amount of yarn I was working with. I need to get buttons. I was looking at my stash and I don't have buttons, and I don't think any of them fit nicely with this, but I don't think it'll be hard to find baby butter yellow buttons. And this is another project where I have been saving weaving in ends for when I want to be knitting, or I'm in like watching a really good show, don't want to be reading, but my hands are a problem. So yeah, those are my 2 finished objects. I do have a couple works in progress. Whip number 1, and the less exciting of the 2, is this hat. I have just finished the first fold of the brim and started the second. It is going to replace a hat that I kind of Frankensteined several elements of my favorite hat patterns together to make my perfect hat, and then promptly lost it the following autumn. I have mourned this hat ever since, and the week that I started my new job as a congrats on your new job, to me, from me, with all my love gift, I went to the Faraway yarn store, which is across the provincial border into Quebec, which isn't even that far into Quebec. Like, it's still in downtown Hull, but I live in Ottawa and you have to cross the river. Anyway, I went to the yarn store, Les Laines Biscotte, and got myself this superwash merino plus silk hand-dyed yarn in this sort of swampy green color. I think it's 90% merino, 10% silk, which is the exact same base as the yarn that I lost. It's not the same dyer. This is by Patrick Knits, but the K in Patrick is immediately connects it to knits. It's one word, which is a Quebec-based hand dyer. And this is as close to the yarn of the original hat as I could find. The original hat was in another Quebec hand dyer's yarn, Louise Roberts Designs. Same base, it's a DK, and the color Poseidon. I don't remember what color this is, but I like it. I think it'll look nice with my hair, my skin. And from memory, I am trying to recreate that hat that of course I took no notes for, because I just assumed I would remember, and I don't. But I'm following what is functionally the headstock pattern by Amanda Sun, which is a free 2x2 rib hat pattern, which I really, really like. The crown decreases are quite beautiful. You do them inside out. It's less intimidating than you think, and so they're quite pretty. Combined with the folded over instructions from the Better Now beanie by Lily Kate France, and just what I know I like in a hat. My plan is I'm trying to make it kind of big and a bit looser between the stitches than is appropriate for a Canadian winter hat, and then, like the first one, I'm going to felt it a little bit. I started the new job a couple months ago, and this has been pretty slow going because the rib has been rather irritating. The problem hand, which is sort of a bummer because I had originally envisioned this as a commute hat because I got it to celebrate my new job. I would work on it on the commute to the new job, but irritating on hands, 8 hours of desk work, irritating on hands is not a good combination. So instead I have just been packing my sweater project with me on the bus and the train, which is fine for now, but I think eventually will become a little unwieldy. Despite that, I am undaunted. I will finish this in time for winter. Winter is long in this country, and I will have my nice new hat. It's very soft. I try to otherwise avoid superwash yarns, but this one is one of the few I have found I can tolerate on my forehead, which is very, very sensitive, and I'm happy to have it again soon. So I guess this is sort of an acquisition, as well as a work in progress. And my second, and I would say primary whip, is an uninteresting tube to show you. I will do my best to make this interesting, despite the fact that it's a tube. This will be, eventually, with some luck at this point, the Bygone Blouse by Lydia Morrow. It's my first Lydia Morrow pattern. One of my friends, Charlotte, has knit one of Lydia Morrow's tank tops twice. Highly recommended it. My plan is to lengthen the sleeves and make them full-length sweater sleeves so I can wear this in the winter, which is a much more appropriate use of a 100% wool garment for me in my climate. Lydia Morrow's patterns are very size inclusive in terms of the size range, but also offers pretty comprehensive bust shaping. Like, you can add darts if you'd like, if you're someone with a bigger chest, and take sizing really into account and offers notes on modifications. So if that's something that interests you, maybe check out their patterns. They are a little bit more expensive, but I thought that was worth it considering I'm not buying very many patterns right now because I'm knitting less, so I might as well buy a pattern that I'm really excited about. Also, it's one of the ways I can support people in our community without accumulating yarn, physical clutter in our house. And they do offer a sliding scale based on financial needs, so if affordability is a problem, there are discount codes to lower the overall price. But all of that said, this is the Bygone Blouse. I am knitting it in Kinross 4-ply by Wee County Yarns, which is 100% wool in the color Inver Array, which is this pretty, almost greeny blue. I got this 2 years ago when I visited London. It is a fingering weight yarn. This is a fingering weight pattern, and I have been waiting for the right sweater to cast this on. And this is becoming at risk of sitting in my stash for too long. I try not to be overly precious and hoard materials because that just leads to a stash that gets kind of out of control as far as my comfort and preferences. And so I was really excited when I saw the Bygone Blouse, immediately wanted to make it, and already had fingering weight yarn that seemed appropriate. This is the yarn where legend says that if you wash it and block it with dish detergent, it is as soft as cashmere. Already with regular wool wash, my swatch is pretty darn soft, which is why I felt comfortable knitting a negative ease sweater with it. But that said, I did size up from what, based on the size guide, was going to be my size, which I think had me at like 6 inches of negative ease, which felt like it was going to be just too much for me. I don't want wool rammed into my armpits, even if it is soft. That's just not a pleasant sensory experience for me. And also, it's a 28 stitch gauge, which we will come back to. But I wasn't sure if with the stretch, I wanted that little ease over my bust. I didn't want to have to be worried about undergarment showing or it being kind of gappy. So I sized up to a size that I thought would give me about -4 inches of ease, and I was comfortable with that. And I knit a swatch. It's right here. Is it a big swatch? No, but I made it, and I measured it before and after blocking. And I got 32 stitches in 4 inches across. So I thought, okay, that's not unusual for me. I am a tighter knitter. I will go up a needle size because I'm supposed to be at 28 and I got 32. And I thought, with the weight of a full garment, that will probably stretch out a bit. So having like a little bit of wiggle room will be okay. And at that small a gauge, I don't think it would be a problem to be 1.5 stitches off. I measured this the other day and I'm at 26 stitches. The gauge down here is different than the gauge up here. You might even be able to see that. I am incredibly frustrated. I have been working on this for like a month and a half, using all my rare, precious knitting time to just knit in a circle forever, and it has betrayed me. I don't know if I should rip back and then do the whole body over again on a smaller needle size, or if I should do a spicy mid-project block, a vintage Rachel special, to see where we're actually sitting. Because I did find when I originally blocked this that it didn't grow, the stitches just kind of fluffed up. So if we stay at 26 stitches, maybe it's not the end of the world to be 2 stitches off. In my original calculations, I thought it wasn't going to be the end of the world to be 2 stitches off tighter. Maybe I'll feel the same way with it wider. But this is fingering weight yarn. These are small needles. My hands, I keep saying it, but they're dicey. So when I tried this on, and when I measured it, I'm currently at -1 inches of ease. I wanted to be at -4. And the pattern says for optimal fit, especially considering this has a close fitted collar, -6. And it's not like I have been intentionally knitting more loosely. I don't know if it's a product of my hands being kind of off or weaker since the injury and using them less, but I have been, since noticing it, trying to tighten up my knitting, and it's just simply not working. So even if I go down by 0.25 millimeters in needles, I really struggle to believe it'll make a noticeable difference. And in fact, I had this problem with my fortune sweater. I just didn't remember it until this happened, where after I separated for sleeves, I knit part of the body in the round, and I had been doing the part pre-sleeve separation. It was a raglan also in the round. For some reason, my gauge dramatically changed and was significantly looser, and I did rip a lot of it back and re-knit it, I think 2 sizes down, but I don't think I have needles that are 2 sizes down from this on the appropriate sized cord, so I'm at a bit of a loss, and maybe I'm filming this to procrastinate making a decision and still engage in knitting, but that's annoying. I am aware that this is the bulk of it, because the bygone blouse, it's quite fitted. You separate at the underarm for front and back, but it's so, like, there's a really sharp kind of curve that goes up to sit the apex of your shoulder, because it's meant to be a very vintage inspired blouse. So that would go by really quickly. The back would go by really quickly. The sleeve shaping for the puff sleeves I think would be a lot of fun and happen again very quickly. So if I was to redo this, I would be redoing the bulk of the knitting, which is not an appealing prospect when my knitting time is already so limited. It might be the only way to get a finished object that I like, but sad. I have been putting off using some of my fingering weight yarns when I was more focused on stash busting, because fingering weight projects take longer and I was trying to get through more. But summer feels like a good time to be working on smaller needles, so I have been happily chugging along with this. But the ease here is an issue. I think talking about this with you has convinced me to probably rip it back and just reknit the whole thing on a smaller needle. I think I could just go and use the needle that I used for the ribbing down here and just redo all of this, but I might be a little self-indulgent and block it just to prove to myself it's not going to be fixed by blocking. Things don't get smaller in blocking, but you know what I mean. And then just suck it up and rip it back. But it is a bummer, because up until I realized and I looked down and I thought my stitches look looser than they should be, I was having a grand old time making this, and I was really looking forward to sleeve separation and working flat and doing all the shaping, because that is just so much fun. Besides those, the next couple projects on the horizon for me are some sort of small baby knit for one of my new coworkers who is having a baby. I feel like I'm always coming on here and saying, hi, I'm making something for a coworker who's having a baby. Selfishly, I find them really fun. I have a book of baby patterns that my mom got me that are all in a worsted weight, that are very classic and fun and fast and a great way to use scraps. And not only am I using up stash yarn, it's leaving my house and slowly lowering the amount of stuff I have. Last time I counted, my yarn stash was sitting around 7,000 or 8,000 grams of yarn, which is a bit more than I'm comfortable with. If you followed my last stash busting series, I will talk about the state of my stash at the end. But so I have to look through my stuff and figure out what I think is best for this particular baby. It's going to be a summer baby, so maybe I'll make something in 6-month size so that they can wear it when it's cold here. So I need to cast that on. Another thing that is very much on my mind as something that I want to work on soon is the second Halloween sock. I started making this last summer before I was injured. It is the I'm So Baddie sock pattern by Stone Knits in her first color workbook. It's so fun. I love a colorwork sock, and this is something that was like super scrappy and I found really enjoyable for that reason. I'm using like 3 different black yarns to finish this. As you can see, I haven't actually grafted the toe shut in case I need to use a different yarn. And it's not the best fitting sock for my weird feet because it is a short row heel and pretty big colorwork motifs, which gets in the way of the different sizes. But The plan is to wear these like 3 times a year in the month of October as a way to acknowledge Halloween while sitting in my office job. So if they don't actually need to fit that nicely, I just want to wear them for fun. And I love making colorwork socks. I think that Charlotte Stone is one of the best colorwork sock pattern designers. The charts are intuitive, easy to memorize, and have an eye towards you don't have to catch that many floats, which I really appreciate. So I would like to make the second sock, which is currently 3 rows of ribbing, before Halloween. I obviously didn't get to wear them for Halloween last year, and I would like to wear them for Halloween this year. My recent misadventures with gauge has me kind of worried that my gauge has changed so significantly that the second sock is not going to fit like the first sock. However, only one way to find out, and also, like I said, this is not meant to be part of my typical sock rotation where I'm really picky about fit and I want them to be my exact perfect sock recipe. I want to wear these for Halloween and like 2 other office days in the month of October, you know, and use up this ball of orange yarn that I have from other colorwork socks and this ball of black sock yarn for colorwork socks, and continue what I was doing before, which is cutting out the black yarn in this leftover self-striping that I'm not going to use any of the other colors for. That's what I've been doing, and I find that really fun. I'm not usually someone who's thinking about Halloween in the summertime. I try and be focused on the season that it is. However, considering how long it takes me to finish knitted projects these days, I need to get a head start. And so I'm hoping within the next month to really in earnest pick up this sock again. My next planned like bigger cast-ons are the Auto Sweater by Petite Knit and a red cardigan for myself out of the yarn over here. The Auto Sweater by Petite Knit is a drop shoulder men's sweater with stripes that have a little bit of color work kind of extending out from the contrast color stripes. And instead of having one contrast color, I have been saving some John Arbon Yarnadelic yarn that I got as a souvenir on our London trip 2 years ago. And I think it would be really, really cool to alternate which of those colors. I have 3 in various shades of blue that are really cool, with a probably plain white, to create a little bit more interest. The ideal finished object is a sweater that my boyfriend and I can share. It'll be fitted on him and kind of oversized on me to, number 1, avoid people commenting about the boyfriend sweater curse, and number 2, have a really cool sweater. For the past year of stash busting, I have been more focused on scraps than I had on larger quantities of yarn, and I find my attention shifting a little bit from things like the baddie socks to things like the bygone blouse or the auto sweater, where instead of finishing 5 scrappy projects in 3 months that are all 100 grams of yarn or less, I'm spending 2.5, 3, 4 months on a sweater, but getting like 3 or 4 or 500 grams of yarn out of stash all at once. And I think it makes sense to have some natural ebb and flow in the kind of projects that are appealing to me for stash busting. I imagine I'll want to go back to scrap busting soon, especially since as I finish these projects, they will result in scraps. But after some scrap busting, I've looked around and I don't have obvious projects in mind for a lot of what's left, even though I still have a lot of scraps. So I'm looking forward to taking bigger chunks out of my stash and creating them into things that I love and that will be worn instead of collecting dust instead. The other project I'm most looking forward to casting on, bigger project, is the fabled red cardigan I have been talking about for like 2 years. I went on a trip with some friends to Hickton. It's in Prince Edward County, and we popped into Rosehaven Yarn Shop, and I finally got the red cardigan yarn that I have been dreaming of. This is Briggs & Little Heritage in the color red. I would say this is pretty true to color. In person, it's maybe a smidge darker, but if what you are seeing on screen is a cranberry, I would say you're seeing what I'm seeing in person. It is a 100% pure wool yarn. There are 196 meters in 113 grams. I would say this is about a DK. I've worked with it before. I really liked it. It is 100% Canadian grown, milled, dyed, and Briggs & Little is the oldest continuously run family mill in the entire country, and their offerings are pretty affordable. Each of these 113/4 ounce skeins was less than $10. Prices have gone up in recent years because isn't that true for everything? But pretty affordable for a sweater's quantity. I, having sensitive skin, could not wear this next to skin in a scarf or a sweater without something underneath, but my plan is to make a really warm cardigan, and I will always be wearing something underneath that, so I'm not too concerned. I told myself I was only allowed to buy the red cardigan yarn once I had completed significant stash busting, and I feel like I had, and also it's just a really nice memory from this trip with my friends, and I love Briggs & Little. Rosehaven Yarn Shop was pretty nice. I recommend it if you're in Prince Edward County. I have not found a pattern to make with this yet. I'm picturing a round neck raglan with maybe about 4 to 6 inches of ease and maybe a little bit of light cinching at the sleeves, maybe a little bit more detail around the raglan, and obviously somewhere between a DK and a worsted. I haven't found the pattern yet, but I will keep looking. I imagine it'll be a little while before I cast this on, but I think it'll be a great wintry cardigan. Could lean festive if I wear it in a festive context. Could just be a fun, bright pop of color during the dreary months, but I'm looking forward to it. Whilst in Prince Edward County, we popped into one of those like slightly fancier thrift stores, and while I don't normally try and buy things from slightly fancier thrift stores because regular thrift stores exist, I saw this cross-stitch designed tin covered in little houses, but they're cross-stitched. Pretty pumped about that. So now the yarn lives here and is on display while I wait to use it. The lid also has one. If you have any interest in seeing my cross-stitch projects, I can show you. I have been doing a fair amount of cross-stitch and it's been fun, but it really has, it's you know, if you think knitting is slow, cross-stitch is not for you. Another acquisition is this skein of marled alpaca yarn. I think it's about a worsted weight, and it's a birthday gift from one of my friends who went to an alpaca farm for somebody else's bachelorette party, which, first of all, sickest bachelorette party ever. Second of all, isn't that so nice? So it's 100% alpaca, it's super soft. I wish I had the name of the farm, but I don't. So I think this will be a really wonderful soft something accessory. Not sure what yet, but I think it's quite lovely. I have continued to track yarn in and yarn out this year since I did my how much did I knit in 2025 video, and overall I am net negative 1,373 grams of yarn. I have 905 grams of yarn in, including the yarn to finish the fortune sweater, the gift I just showed you, the first day present to myself, and this red heritage yarn. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not really allowed to buy any more yarn for the rest of the year, and I feel comfortable with that. And I have, out of my house overall, between gifts and destashing, 2,011 grams of yarn out of my house. So hopefully I will be down net negative 2,026 grams of yarn by the end of the year overall, including like the amount added to my yarn subtracted from that, but we'll see. I don't want to put any pressure on myself and cause any grief for my hands. That's everything I've been working on, if you've been wondering. Not super topical in terms of trends, not super topical in terms of summer knitting as a concept, but that's the truth of what I've been making and the timelines I'm working with. So yeah, I don't know when I'll pop in next, but I hope all of you guys are doing well, and I'm wishing you all health and happy knitting.